Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for checking out this video for today. So I'm going to be presenting on exploring root causes and the function of the eating disorder from a Christian perspective. So my name is Megan Lavin, and I'm the founder and executive director of Live Recovered, which I'll kind of get into on slides coming up. Why I'm passionate about this topic is I struggled with an eating disorder for many years in high school and college. And there were some root causes that were underlying the eating disorder that once I kind of was aware of what they were and started to work on those root causes, that really helped my eating disorder recovery. Prior to that, my recovery was very stagnant for quite a while. So I'm passionate about just kind of trying to see, can we find the root cause and the function the eating disorder is serving, and how can that help us with recovery? So a little bit of my background. I have a bachelor's in exercise science, a doctorate in physical therapy, and a degree in a master's of education in health education and promotion with a concentration in eating disorders. I absolutely love learning. I love just gaining more knowledge. So that's something I'm passionate about. As I mentioned, I am the founder and executive director of Live Recovered. I am an eating disorder recovery peer mentor, and I'm personally recovered from anorexia, orthorexia, social anxiety, death anxiety, and OCD. Here's just a picture of me and my husband Jacob and our dog Ron. So what is Live Recovered? If you don't know Live Recovered, we're in a nonprofit organization dedicated to shining a light on eating disorders and helping others live fully recovered. This is through speaking events, info sessions, recovery groups, peer mentorship, recovery letters, stories on our website and Instagram. So we're really just dedicated to shining a light on eating disorders, and we do so in a Christ-centered way. Um, so yeah, that's just a little bit about us. So an overview for today, we'll start out with contributors and causes of eating disorders. We'll go into potential purposes of the eating disorder, signs the eating disorder is being used for those potential purposes, and how do we overcome those root causes and purposes of the eating disorder. So please keep in mind, I'm not going to be covering all the potential causes and potential purposes of the eating disorder. So feel free to use this as a guide to kind of help you on your own journey too. And hopefully it'll provide a little insight into your eating disorder and help you with your own recovery. So contributors and causes of eating disorders. So this will kind of be background information before we go into some of the more specific root causes and purposes. So there's different types of causes and contributors to eating disorders. This can include genetic, biological, psychological, behavioral, social, cultural. So we'll kind of dive into each of these briefly, and we'll go from there. So genetic, eating disorders do run in families, and they are heritable. There is an 11 times increased chance for females developing anorexia that have a relative with anorexia, and also an elevated risk of developing bulimia, OSFED, and binge eating disorder with a family history. So there is definitely a genetic component to eating disorders, or there can be a genetic component. In terms of biological, this can include brain chemistry, differences in hormone levels, neurotransmitter levels. There can be differences in reward pathways in the brain, increase in cortisol and vasopressin, abnormalities in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and chronic conditions like type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, food allergies, inflammatory bowel disease, cystic fibrosis, which can impact potentially developing an eating disorder. So these are just kind of some biological things that may be occurring as well, contributing to the development of an eating disorder. Psychological. So here's some psychological risk factors that can contribute to the development of an eating disorder. I don't want to say cause directly because there's a variety of things that can contribute, but some psychological components include being perfectionistic, being very type A, risk avoidant, very rigid, rule follower, people pleaser, internalization of the thin ideal, and having dissatisfaction with body image are all psychological factors that could contribute to an eating disorder. Now kind of going into non-modifiable versus modifiable, because I really like kind of seeing like what are things that we can modify to help to overcome the eating disorder. So these things cannot be modified. We can't modify our genetics. We can't take away if we've experienced trauma. We can't take away if we've experienced bullying. We can't erase a history of dieting. Sometimes we can't help certain chronic conditions and other past experiences that have contributed to the eating disorder. So just kind of saying that there are some things that we can't impact for helping to, or that we can't change that happened. But we can also work on our response to what happened as well. But these are things kind of like we can't modify our past experiences or really our genetic makeup. But what can we modify? We can modify perfectionistic tendencies, which are very common in individuals with eating disorders. We can modify anxiety, our response to stimuluses, our risk avoidance. We can modify our tendencies to overachieve. We can work through our core fears and emotional dysregulation, impulsivity. We can work on cognitive inflexibility, body dissatisfaction, internalization of the thin ideal, limited social support, and low energy availability. So these are all things that we can work to modify. And this doesn't mean that we have to work to modify them alone. I highly recommend working with a whole treatment team to really work on tackling these modifiable factors. Just because we know there's a lot that can go into the development of an eating disorder. Typically, someone doesn't just have one thing that leads to the eating disorder, there's a variety. So it's very important to kind of work through these things with a trusted therapist, a dietitian, primary care doctor, psychiatrist, potentially peer mentor, recovery coach, if you're able to get connected with those services. How can we start to overcome these modifiable factors? So as you can see, cognitive behavioral therapy is on quite a lot of these areas. So we can work on getting connected with a therapist, working through some of these thought challenging, working on a response to stimuli to help to lessen these areas. So perfectionism, anxiety, a gold standard for OCD and also very helpful for social anxiety, death anxiety, hypochondria is exposure and response prevention, which is exposing ourselves to our fears in a systematic way, starting with lower level fears and working up to higher level fears. So I highly recommend researching a bit more on exposure response prevention. If you're really struggling with anxiety, especially OCD, social anxiety, these are some really great tools for that. We've got some more cognitive behavioral therapy for this as well. Core fears we'll get into. That'll be kind of the core of this presentation. Emotional dysregulation is dialectical behavioral therapy, really working to learn how to regulate our emotions and our responses to different stressors and learn strategies to help cope with the challenging emotions that we may be experiencing. We've got more cognitive behavioral therapy, limited social support. I see that this is really common in individuals with eating disorders, and I know it was really common for me too. It's really working to get involved, join a community group, a Bible study, a club, and for low energy availability, so not having enough nourishment, that can contribute to the development of an eating disorder. Getting connected with a dietitian. If food is lacking, seeing if you can get connected with community resources to make sure that you are having enough to eat. Now we're going to go into survey results. So if you're familiar with Live Recovered, you may have seen that I posted a survey on root causes, core functions of the eating disorder, and I just wanted to take some time to go over the results. I think this will also help people to not feel alone in kind of what they're experiencing and feeling. I know that I felt really alone in my recovery and kind of like these negative thoughts I was experiencing. So hopefully this helps you to kind of feel comfortable as well, or also to learn more to help loved ones or just gain knowledge on eating disorders. So this is kind of the age breakdown. So we didn't have anyone in the 10 to 13 category, but we have some individuals from 14 to 17, some more 18 to 21, more in the 22 to 25. This was our most popular age range. We got 26 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, and 50 to 59. So we do have a nice wide range of ages from the survey. We've got 55 responses as well. This is from individuals kind of related to Live Recovered, so people that have been in our peer mentorship programs, our support groups, are connected on our Instagram page. So kind of give you a little idea of the population here. So 100% of the respondents indicated they're female. The average age of onset for their eating disorder from respondents is 14, and the average length of time that individuals are currently struggling or have struggled is 13.9 years. So this was a question on what behaviors do you struggle with? So included restricting, binging, purging, abuse of laxatives, diet pills, etc., compulsive exercise, orthorexia type behaviors, ARFID, and there's a few extra that people added that didn't fall into these categories. Now, I think it's really important to highlight 100%. So now we see I did miss one person from the first little survey up there, or results. But so 56 people, 56 of 56 indicate that restricting has been part of their eating disorder, is currently part. So I think that's really important to show that restricting is a main factor in all types of eating disorders, whether you struggle with binging, purging, over-exercising, restricting is a big portion. And also compulsive exercise, as we see that 83.9%, 47 of the 56 people indicate that they struggle with compulsive exercise. This is going into any conditions that the individual had prior to the development of their eating disorder, or that they suspect that they had, because I know that not everyone was diagnosed with certain conditions prior to the development of their eating disorder. So just highlighting that about 68% struggle with generalized anxiety, 61% with depression, and then I kind of went through the results and saw like how many people had checked at least one anxiety disorder. So social anxiety, generalized anxiety, panic disorder, phobia related, separation anxiety, OCD. And 48 of the 56 people that responded indicated at least one anxiety disorder prior to the development of their eating disorder. So about 86%. Which is in line with the research that indicates that there's a high percentage of individuals with eating disorders that had an anxiety disorder prior to developing the eating disorder, which I think is important to highlight because that can kind of help us to overcome the eating disorder. If we have a tendency for anxiety or struggling with this, could that have been a contributor to the development of our eating disorder? That's very likely that it was. And then this is a question for individuals to check all that they think contributed to the development of their eating disorder. So the top three are perfectionism with 84% or 47 people indicating they have that perfectionism as a contributor, low self-worth, self-esteem with 88%, and body image dissatisfaction with 82%. But you can also see that there's a large group of people that have said trauma was a contributor. We've got depression, difficulty expressing emotions, lack of healthy coping tools. So as you can see, and definitely feel free to pause if you want to look through the different categories. There's a wide range of contributors that people have indicated have contributed to the development of their eating disorder. So if these are things that contributed to the development, if we potentially start to work on some of these contributors, would that help lessen our eating disorder thoughts, our eating disorder behaviors, if we're getting at kind of some of these underlying contributors? And these are all the core beliefs that people have had. This was the hardest one for me to go through because I have a list of, I don't know how many are here, but things like I am worthless, I don't matter, I am nothing, I am not enough, I am helpless, I deserve to suffer, I am disgusting, I am hopeless, I am useless, I am unlovable, I am less than everyone else is better than me. I don't deserve love, I am bad, I am insignificant. I don't belong, I'm a failure, I am unwanted, I am unlikable. And there's a few extra added. I am too much, I am invisible, I am gross. What was difficult with this one is there's so many people that checked all of them. And that just really broke my heart. I know I've been there. I've felt a lot of these negative things about myself. So if you're one of those people that checked all, my heart really goes out to you. And yeah, I think working on some of these core beliefs, because if we believe that we don't matter, that we're worthless, if we believe these top three, I'm not enough, which 86% indicated they have had that thought or currently have it. I am worthless, 80%. I am less than everyone else. Everyone else is better than me, 76%. So if we can work on some of these underlying core beliefs and coming from a Christian perspective, if we can use biblical truth to overcome these core beliefs, can that help to decrease our use of the eating disorder as a coping tool? If we're using it to cope with this feeling of I'm not enough, so I need to use these eating disorder behaviors so I feel like I'm enough, or I'm not worthless, so what's the point of recovery if I don't really matter? Or I'm less than everyone else is better than me. Why should I use my parents' money, my own money for treatment? So if we can kind of tackle some of these underlying core beliefs, I think that can potentially be a great thing to help our recovery journey. And these are core fears that people have had. Going through the top three, fear of losing control and not being in control. So let's find that one on the list. Is 80.4% of people. Fear of failing was another one that was high at 79%. And fear of being rejected, 73%. So just showing that, at least from the individuals that completed the survey, have very common core fears that they have. As you can see, that there's a lot of individuals that are struggling with the same core fears, which I think can be helpful is when you are feeling really alone and like no one understands, just to know that there's other people out here that feel the same way as you. And if as individuals that are struggling with eating disorders are having the same type of core fears or very common similar core fears, could that potentially be a contributor to the development of the eating disorder then, and what continues the eating disorder if we're having these very similar or same core fears that are going into the eating disorder? So just a thought to kind of ponder. And what potential functions do you think the eating disorder is serving you? Number one, which makes sense, is if there is a core fear of losing control, not being in control, one of the functions of the eating disorder is likely going to be as a way to feel in control, with 91%, 51 out of 56 people, indicating that their eating disorder, one of the potential functions, and how it's been serving them in their life or has served them is a way to feel in control. And then also with 86%, 48 of 56 people indicating their eating disorder is being used to numb emotions. So if we kind of think through, I love like root causes. I love trying to get to like what is the core of the thing that's going on that's causing us challenges in our life. So if we think that the potential function of the eating disorder is a way to feel in control, if we can challenge this need to feel in control, if we can dive deeper into our need to feel in control, will that help to lessen eating disorder behaviors and thoughts if we are stepping outside of the eating disorder to understand that maybe we don't actually need to be in control if we dive into it from a Christian perspective, which we'll get into in some slides down the road. And if we're using the eating disorder to numb emotions, would that maybe be a good step to take is to cope with challenging emotions, increase our distress tolerance? Would that then lessen our desire to use eating disorder behaviors to numb our emotions if we have these tools in place to help cope with them? So just some ideas. And as you can see, there are some other common ones: distract from current reality, a way to cope with trauma, a way to cope with life changes, escape, avoid emotions, provide sense of safety, stability, decrease feelings of uncertainty. So hopefully this kind of gives you an idea too, if you're not sure what the potential functions of your eating disorder are, potentially looking through this list would be helpful. And if you're looking through this and like it's cut off and you would like the full list, please feel free to reach out. I'll have my email. I am more than welcome to kind of chat and help you out as much as I can. So now we're going to go into potential purposes and core beliefs of the eating disorder. So this is kind of the core of the presentation for today. So potential purposes, main areas. I took the potential purposes from this list here. And I kind of took some time to analyze them and see, like, is there common themes in some of these that can go in the same category? So came up with 4 categories. The first one is control, uncertainty, powerlessness. The second category for potential purposes of the eating disorder is meaning, purpose, identity, connection. The third one is escape avoidance. And the fourth one, I didn't really have a good category to put the fear of death and dying in. So I have that here, which just could likely go into control, uncertainty, with just uncertainty with death and dying. So this is kind of where the presentation will go from here, is focusing on these areas. But first, jump into the core beliefs. So here's a list of the core beliefs from the presentation and potential core beliefs that I had researched that individuals with eating disorders may experience. I do have a list of citations, so if you're interested, please let me know. But I'm not going to read through all of these because I kind of read through quite a few of them before. Feel free to pause and see if some of these relate to you, if you're like, I really feel like a lot of these are true for me. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, because I know that I felt really overwhelmed when I started to attack the root causes of the eating disorder, and especially these core beliefs, like feeling unworthy, like I don't belong, I don't matter. And I was like, I've been thinking this for so long. It's going to take forever for me to overcome it. Here's a little smidge of hope. I'm not going to say it's going to be super quick and easy for everyone, or for even a significant portion of individuals, but I think this gives a little bit of hope that it might not take as long as you think to overcome some of these core beliefs of like feeling unworthy, feeling like I don't belong, if we're replacing them with the truth. So just thinking back to when you were a child, did you believe in Santa? Just stick with me. How long did it take you to stop believing once someone revealed the truth to you? I would say probably pretty quick. So just going to show that if we have a trusted person, aka God, who is telling us this truth, his words from the Bible, can it be that potentially that it could be pretty quick that we can use those scriptural truths and overcome these core beliefs? Possibly. It might take other people a longer time if we've been thinking these things for a long time. And our brain pathways are very quick with coming to the notion that I don't belong, I'm not enough. Then it might take longer. But this kind of gave me hope when I was struggling. Like, okay, like I heard from trusted people, my parents, that Santa didn't exist. And then boom, pretty much instantly stopped believing it. Just giving us hope that like if we're getting truth from a trusted source, God, from his word, will it potentially take as long as we think? Maybe, maybe not. So eating disorders as the way to feel and control. Now going into some of these core functions. Functions of the eating disorder under this umbrella: control. So these are some things that can indicate that maybe you are using your eating disorder or your loved one is using their eating disorder to cope with feeling in control or to feel in control. First one, feel in control to gain control. Just like maybe you have this notion that you know that you're using the eating disorder to make sure you feel in control. To cope with life changes, going to college, the end of a relationship, decreasing feelings of uncertainty, to provide a sense of safety, to attain perfection, to cope with fear of death and dying, to cope with trauma, cope with feelings of powerlessness. So these are kind of core functions from that survey, all kind of that fall under the category of control. Because if we're experiencing life changes, likely we feel out of control. There's a lot of change. So now we want to use the eating disorder thoughts and behaviors as a way to feel in control, because we can control these things even if everything around us feels chaotic. Decreasing feelings of uncertainty. If we're feeling uncertain for the future, we don't know what's to come, we might use the eating disorder to focus on numbers, weight, our body, to feel a sense of certainty if we feel uncertain other places. To provide a sense of safety. If we're not feeling safe, if things are feeling chaotic, maybe we're using that eating disorder because it's something that is familiar as a way to feel safe. To attain perfection. Maybe we feel this need to be perfect, which kind of relates to a need of control, and we're using that eating disorder for that. Coping with the fear of death and dying, where maybe we're feeling really uncertain about what happens when we die. We don't have any control with this area, using the eating disorder to cope with it. With trauma, maybe we have had our like power, our control taken away from us and have experienced some trauma. And now, because of that, we're wanting to gain control back in our lives and gain power back in our lives, and using the eating disorder. And that kind of goes with the powerlessness. So what specific eating disorder behaviors tend to be related to control? Restricting your food, types of foods, amount of foods. I want to make a disclaimer, you do not need to struggle with anorexia to struggle with restriction. Restriction is a common piece of all types of eating disorders, as we saw kind of earlier in the presentation and just from the research. People tend to have very rigid food rules, very rigid thoughts around exercise and plans, rigidity in amounts of foods, types of foods. So just a disclaimer that you can struggle with any eating disorder and struggle with restricting. It's very common. Things like purging as a way for control, food rules, rigidity with exercise, not letting others cook for you, rigidity with time of day to eat, and different kind of rules that you might have. Maybe an indicator that you're using the eating disorder as a way to control. Some indicators outside of the eating disorder that may indicate you struggle with control uncertainty. Having a difficulty with delegating tasks. I experience an emotional response when plans that I have created change. Much of my energy is spent on trying to prevent bad things from happening. Maybe you're overly critical of yourself. You don't tolerate making mistakes. You prefer working alone than on a team, tend to micromanage aspects of a situation, often feel inadequate and unworthy, experience intense anxiety with the unknown, and fear you'll be abandoned because you really can't control if someone stays or not, or if they leave, or their thoughts and feelings. Like, we can't control that. So the feelings of potentially being abandoned could fall under this category. Other conditions you may struggle with. If you are struggling with control, uncertainty, powerlessness, perfectionism, OCD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, generalized anxiety, autism. So these are things that are related to rigidity with rules, a sense of control with different areas of your life. Potential core beliefs that relate to control, uncertainty, powerlessness. So what I did from the survey is kind of put down everybody that had selected control as a function of their eating disorder and what were the most common core beliefs for those people. Things like, I am worthless, I am not enough, I am disgusting, I am less than everyone else is better than me, I am a failure. So all of these can kind of relate under the kind of core of struggling with control, uncertainty, or powerlessness. Why do we struggle with a need to be in control? So one, it can be that we have a difficulty with tolerating uncertainty. And this can be small uncertainty, big uncertainty, where we just fear the unknown. We like to be certain about things. We don't want to make a decision. We put off making decisions because we need that certainty. So we could struggle with the need to be in control, with difficulty with tolerating uncertainty. We may struggle with anxiety, and controlling things reduces our anxiety. So we use control as a way to decrease our discomfort. And we may have a trauma history with being controlled or feeling out of control. So here's kind of some of the root causes for need for control. Is this going to be exactly for everyone who struggles with control? Absolutely not. This is just some ideas. So feel free to take it or leave it, whatever you'd like. So if you look at the desire for control and using control to cope with intolerance or discomfort with uncertainty. Maybe we struggle with excessive reassurance asking. Maybe we refuse to delegate tasks. Maybe we have excessive list making. I remember lots and lots of lists I had on my phone. I will not include numbers because I don't think numbers are helpful, but I can relate to a lot of these things. Double checking, triple checking. avoidance of unpredictable or new situations, excessive information gathering, persistent anxiety about the future, difficulty coping with changes, intense discomfort with the unknown, difficulty with decision making, fear of making the wrong choice. So these can be some indicators that you have this desire for control because of this discomfort with uncertainty. So you could kind of look at it with the arrows reversed. Like I have some of these things, like maybe this is an indicator I struggle with uncertainty, and that's why I'm wanting this control. Maybe you have the fear of abandonment, that if you're not carefully controlling things, controlling your actions, your responses, and trying to be perfect, that they will leave you. So this could potentially be kind of a desire for control, because if you're not so controlling of your responses, your emotions, your reactions, your actions, you might fear that you will be abandoned. And that's kind of why you're desiring control. Or maybe you have experienced trauma and you're unconsciously protecting yourself from experiencing that experience again. And that's why you're kind of holding on to control. Or maybe you're using control as a way to try to reduce PTSD symptoms. So again, this is not going to cover everybody, but I hope that this gives you some ideas where if you're like, I think I'm using the eating disorder to cope with control, what can we dive deeper into? Why do I need control? I'll have some worksheets at the end too. As you can see, I'm very like excited. I'm just excited because I love like helping people to break free from eating disorders. So, um, if we ask why do I need this? Why do I have this desire for control? Um, and just diving deeper into it, like what is that root? Why do I feel so strongly that I need control? Because it's deeper than just wanting control. There's something underlying that. So, steps to take if we're struggling in the area of control, uncertainty, powerlessness. Increasing our tolerance for uncertainty, working through acceptance. Let me tell you, when I struggled with the eating disorder, OCD, all that stuff, I hated the word acceptance. I absolutely despised it. I don't like to use hate. It's a strong word, but I really disliked it. What was helpful for me, it was thinking like, I don't like this situation. I I don't approve of the situation, but I'm going to accept things as they are because this is how it is right now. And me trying to fight the situation is only going to bring on more pain and uncertainty, or pain and just discomfort. So, just kind of a potential idea. Maybe, maybe not. One of my OCD therapists, many of them, use this, that if I'm uncertain about if I'm gonna go for a drive and it might storm, but I really want to meet up with my friend and there is a low chance of the storm, but still I am terrified I'm gonna get caught in this storm. Maybe it'll storm, maybe not. Or with the eating disorder, if I take a day off from exercise, maybe my body will change. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Um, Using maybe, maybe not is a way to resist reassurance seeking, which can just kind of be an endless cycle of then we always need reassurance to feel good. And sitting in that discomfort of the uncertainty, because maybe what we're thinking will happen, maybe not. Most likely, we probably have some um, thoughts that are like, it's definitely not going to happen. Like, if I eat this piece of cake, I'm going to gain 5 pounds. Like, no, that's not going to happen. But if we can sit in the uncertainty and the discomfort, then we can help to improve our tolerance for uncertainty. And resisting behaviors that help us to seek certainty. So things like excessive list making, reassurance asking, double checking, triple checking. Resisting those behaviors that are helping us to seek certainty. Because those are just going to be a continuation. Then we're going to need the excessive list making. We're going to need the reassurance asking in order to feel okay and feel certain. But if we can step into that discomfort, lean into the discomfort, that could potentially help us. Accepting that uncertainty is a part of life. Um, Pretty much everything we experience, there's quite a bit of uncertainty to it. We're not going to break free. We can't ever be like fully certain about a situation or thing. So, accepting that uncertainty is a part of life. Challenging our need for control, kind of getting into the root, why do I feel this need for control? and understanding that any control that we have is actually an illusion, which we'll get into that, and increasing mindfulness practices. Maybe we're controlling things because we're certain about something in the future, when really kind of pulling ourselves back into the present might be what we need. So, Christian perspective on control. So, truly, God is the only one in control, and any notion that we've ever had that we are in control is an illusion, because really we're not. We're not in control. We can't control the weather. We can carefully plan a situation, but we can't control that it will follow through. Um, we can have thoughts pop in our head that we don't want to have in our heads, like so. Just knowing that control is an illusion, and this can be a really terrifying thought, like I really need to be in control, and now you're telling me that, like, any control I've ever had is just an illusion, and I'm not actually in control. Um, and I remember feeling and experiencing that, but also experiencing, "Wait a second, this can actually be freeing, that I don't have to carefully control everything. I don't have to carefully plan all my meals. I don't have to make all of these lists. I don't have to do all of these things because actually God is in control, and I can surrender this control to Him and trust that He will provide and take care of me." Now, that doesn't mean that we stop doing completely everything, but it means that we can surrender this tight grip that we have on control. We're holding on to control with our fists like this, and slowly we can start to loosen and open them to the Lord, because He cares for us deeply, um, and He's the one in control, not us. Christian perspective on uncertainty. So, while we may not know exactly what tomorrow brings, we know how the story ends. We know that Jesus rose and conquered the grave, that He conquered sin and death, and that for us that are in Christ, we know that our future is heaven, our future is with the Lord. Um, we know that even though we don't know what tomorrow brings, we know that God is walking next to us through all of it. And He can be in there, He can meet us in our uncertainty. Christian perspective on perfection. So, as humans walking this earth, we cannot be perfect. We can never be perfect. We make mistakes every day. We mess up, and that's okay. It might feel like the end of the world. I've been there, where it feels like if I make a mistake, I'm an absolute terrible, bad person, and this is just terrible. Everything is ruined. But the truth is, it's not. Um, that this world isn't perfect. We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. They're great learning experiences. They're great opportunities to grow. Instead of looking at mistakes as that bad thing, that can be a beautiful thing for God to meet us in there. And the only person that has ever been perfect that has walked this earth is Jesus. We all sin and we all fall short. So rather feeling like this is a heavy burden or a heavy rock to carry, let's instead look at it as something freeing. I can't be perfect, so I'm released from this need to be perfect because it's utterly unattainable. And that can feel terrifying because I know my identity wasn't someone who was a perfectionistic person. And my identity was in perfectionism and trying to put on this perfect facade. Um, so it was terrifying for me to think about releasing my perfectionism to the Lord because I'm like, I'm not comfortable with that. But we can start to ask the Lord, Lord, can you please help me to release this need to be perfect? Can you help me with this? I'm terrified to let go, but I trust you, Lord, and I ask you to help me. Um, so it can be looked at something as a heavy burden if you're really holding tightly to that perfectionism and that need to be perfect. But if we recognize we can never be perfect, it can be something that's beautifully freeing, because we know that perfect is unattainable. And just kind of this notion too, I know sometimes individuals can struggle with scrupulosity or struggle with faith when struggling with um, an eating disorder. And we all fall short of perfection. Nothing we do can make us perfect. None of us are able to jump this gap. Even if we jump the gap and we are short 100 feet or we're short 10 feet, none of us can close this gap of perfection to the Lord on our own. The gap is too wide for us. None of us are ever going to be able to reach it. We're human. We are going to sin. We're going to make mistakes. But Jesus is perfect, and his death on the cross allows us to walk across this gap to the Lord. He has freed us and has given us direct access and a relationship to God. So just knowing that if we fall short 100 feet or 10 feet, none of us can make this jump on our own. We can't be perfect. We're never going to read the Bible enough. We're never going to pray enough. We're never going to do any of these things enough because we're not able to. We're human. We are imperfect. We're in a flawed world. But Jesus's death can free us from that notion that we need to do everything exactly perfectly and rather turn to him for direction and guidance for what he's calling us to. That doesn't mean that we stop trying or we stop reading our Bible, but it means that we can look to the Lord and realize that he has closed the gap for us. So that can free us rather than being very rigid with, I have to read the Bible for 25 minutes every day, or this is terrible, and I have to do this, this, this. We can see that Jesus has already closed the gap for us and allowed us direct access with God. So just a little extra for you. This little graphic, I did create this on the PowerPoint, but this is not like my idea. I saw this while I was in university. So eating disorders is a way to cope with the fear of death and dying. Why am I bringing this one up? Even though it was a low category, because this is very much my story. So I can kind of explain a bit more too, which maybe will help you, because maybe your core function of the eating disorder isn't on here, or maybe it's going to be difficult to figure out what the core is because there's a lot of different factors. But I'll be able to kind of share a little bit of my journey. Signs that eating disorder is being used to cope with the fear of death and dying. You have a fear of death and dying. You have uncertainty about the afterlife, if it exists or not. And if it does exist, whether you will go there or not. You have concerns for your family or friends if they die. You have fear with the process of death, fear of ceasing to exist, fear of getting sick, fear of dying alone. Maybe you've had this fear since you were young. Maybe it seems like it has lessened since you were a child, but diving deeper, you find that it's still there. And you have difficulty with tolerance of uncertainty, just because there is a lot of uncertainty around death and dying for many people. This is absolutely my story. I struggle with the fear of death and dying from very, very young. Just I would sit in church, and anytime they talked about death and dying, I would have to like think about something else because it freaked me out. I was worried about my family dying. I was worried about myself dying. I was worried about ceasing to exist. And it did seem like it had lessened once I had dove into the eating disorder. But we'll kind of chat about that, which actually it didn't lessen, it just kind of morphed. So, some more signs of that you may have death anxiety. It's a little chilly in here, so I'm just gonna grab a blanket. Maybe you feel extremely distressed about death and dying. You spend a lot of time dwelling on your death or other people dying. Having unwanted and distressing images related to death. Avoiding places or activities that remind you of death or dying, maybe a hospital, maybe a graveyard. Going to extreme lengths to prevent or minimize the risk of dying. Very, very, very true for me. So some eating disorder behaviors that may indicate that you're using the eating disorder to cope with the fear of death and dying. So orthorexia behaviors, being very restrictive with the types of foods you eat because of the fear of the ingredients in those foods leading to cancer or disease, therefore death. That was very much underlying my eating disorder with being restrictive with the foods because I was terrified of getting cancer and dying. So it's kind of like, I'll get into it on the little worksheets, but being obsessive and focused on health, potentially restricting or over-exercising in the name of health in order to try to stave off death and dying. Other conditions you may experience, depression from the heaviness of death anxiety, because it's something that can feel really heavy and really draining to experience. Health anxiety, hypochondria, fear of getting sick and dying, contamination OCD, fear of getting sick, maybe you have a fear of being in hospitals, fear of touching surfaces, scrupulosity, existential OCD, having intense distress with existential thoughts, or the purpose and meaning of life, what happens after death, intense distress, when not feeling certain about what happens after death. Steps to take for this fear of death and dying, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, as I mentioned earlier, exposure therapy. Extremely difficult, but very worth it. Because it is kind of starting to get to some of your really big fears. So I know it's really difficult because the fear of death and dying was present for me once I started exposure therapy at like, I want to say maybe 2022, had been going on since I was probably 5, I would guess. So that is a good 15, 17 years of having this pretty intense fear of death and dying. And starting to work on that and challenge that. So I understand it can be so difficult, but it's absolutely worth it if this is something that's underlying some of your other conditions or just really impacting your ability to live a joyful life. Writing ideas of what is perpetuating your death anxiety, reframing how you view death and dying, diving into faith. Research shows that those who are religious have lower rates of death anxiety because they just have a different view of death and dying. Christian perspective on death and dying. Death is not the end for us who are in Christ. Jesus conquered death. And for those that have accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior, our future is in heaven. So we don't have to be as scared of death and dying because we know our future. We know what is going to happen. So I'd really encourage you just to dive into scripture on death and dying. And I do have a book. I think I gave it away. But it was on a book on heaven. I'll have to link it somewhere. But I definitely recommend diving into that. Eating disorder is a way to pursue meaning, purpose, identity, and connection. So, functions of the eating disorder under this umbrella. Maybe using the eating disorder to seek meaning and purpose, to feel special and unique, to cope with low self-worth, self-esteem, to get a reaction from someone, to get other people to notice you and give you attention, seeking connection, community, belonging, prevent from growing up, developing a more womanly body. So, these are all kind of potential functions that are all under the same umbrella of meaning, purpose, identity, connection. Indicators that you may struggle with meaning, purpose, identity, connection. You don't think you matter. You don't think there's purpose in your life. You put your identity in numbers or the things that you do. Example, being a good runner, being a good student, reaching a certain productivity at work. You don't feel like you belong or think your friends are just friends with you because they feel sorry for you. You long to feel seen, heard, noticed, and valued. You fear being abandoned, not loved, forgotten, being alone. You lack strong friendships, and maybe you lack spirituality or have distress and confusion with spirituality. Potential core beliefs that you may be experiencing if you're struggling with meaning, purpose, identity, connection. I am invisible. I am nothing. I am insignificant. I don't belong. I'm unwanted. I'm unlikable. I'm hopeless. I deserve to suffer. I am not enough. Signs the eating disorder is being used to satisfy meaning, purpose, identity, and connection. Maybe you think the eating disorder is the only thing about you that makes you special and unique, and without it, you are nothing. Maybe you enjoy the attention that you have from an eating disorder. And maybe you feel a strong sense of belonging with the eating disorder community, which I think it's great to feel belonging, but also if our belonging is coming from staying sick, that could potentially be something that is not helpful for us. Other conditions you may have if you are struggling with meaning, purpose, identity, connection, low self-worth, low self-esteem, depression, social anxiety, scrupulosity, existential OCD. Steps to take. Dive into true meaning, belonging, and connection through taking a class, volunteering, joining a church community. This I know can be especially difficult if you struggle with social anxiety. But taking small steps to start to experience connection and belonging outside of the eating disorder. And remembering that the eating disorder doesn't make you special or unique. It actually takes away your light and everything about you that truly makes you special. It just makes you more like everyone else that has an eating disorder. One of my therapists had said this during a group session, and I was just like, whoa, because I had felt like the eating disorder is the only thing that makes me special, and I'm nothing without it. But he was like, actually, you just become like everyone else with an eating disorder. And I was like, huh, interesting. So maybe ponder that for a bit. Christian perspective on feeling special. God created you on purpose for purpose. He looked at the mountains, the stars in the sky, the expanse of the ocean that he created, and he looked at you, and he looked at this world, and he thought to himself that the world needs one of you. And how precious is that? And that God didn't have to create you. God doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to create anyone or do anything, but he wanted to create you. God wanted you to exist and wants you to exist. I absolutely love this video. So let's see. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and make sure that I am sharing it with sound because I absolutely love this video. Okay, we're going to share with sound. Sorry, I had to type in my password and I can never remember my password,
So today I don't have advice for you. I have encouragement for you that I think one or many of you needed to hear on this day. I just feel it in my heart. I was thinking about encouraging you about the beautiful and divine purpose for your life and how much you as a woman matter. And I came across some writing from my dear and beloved friend, Mrs. Nick. Now, for those of you who have been around for a long time, Mrs. Nick was a dear friend of mine. She was my mentor in women's ministry. She and I worked together in ministry for 2 years before she passed away. And so much of what she did and taught me lives on in what I share with all of you. As I was thinking about what I wanted to encourage you with this week, I came across some of Mrs. Nick's writings. And there's something that I just felt in my heart that one or many of you needed to hear that she shared with some women on retreat many years ago when we were working together. I wrote this down in my notebook. These words, they really, really moved me. And I wanted you to hear these words and let them sink into your soul. She said, "Sometimes you may have heard me say that you are a thought of God. Let me elaborate on that notion. It's like God had this great idea. He was tootling around heaven, do, and he stopped in his tracks. Wait a minute. Wow, of course. She is exactly what the world needs right here, right now. This minute. And then you were, and here you are, and no one can take your place. No one can do for the world what you alone can do. If you weren't here, there would be a hole in the heart of the universe, and everything would be off kilter and out of order. There is a purpose in you, that you have all the talents needed to be and do. So I'm going to ask you to do something you may not have planned on doing. I want you to trust God, the God who thought of you. Trust that there is a reason for you that is divine, holy, and sacred, and worthy of love. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine with me God tootling around heaven thinking about you. Trust God that He'll help you make His dream of you come true." Those words, struck me right in the heart when I read them the other night, and I wanted to share those with you because it's so true, and I wanted to encourage you in that this week. She says, there's a purpose in you that you have all the talents needed to be and to do. And some of you, and I feel this as we talk when I'm on the road with you and meeting you, and you just feel like there's not a lot of purpose in your life, that you're not, touching people or reaching people, or like you're just like, what am I doing here? What is the reason that I'm here? What does God want me to do with my life? And I wanted to remind you of that today, that your life matters and that there's a beautiful purpose in place for your life that only you can carry out. And I feel like so often we fall into the trap of believing that like our life only matters if people recognize us or see us, or if we get awards or acclaim, or whatever that might be, if we are seen and known and loved on this grand scale. And I feel like there's so much to be said for that for each of us. We think, what difference can I make? Like, who am I affecting? What change can I create? Like, what, in my little life, in the grand scheme of the world, like, what does it even matter? There's a beautiful and divine purpose unfolding in your life right now. And you, my sister, you matter. You matter to the world. Just like Mrs. Nick said, there's a purpose in you. No one can do for the world what you alone can do. You were uniquely created, that you are seen and you are known and you are loved by God. I know that for a fact. And I am sure that you are seen and known and loved by people around you in your life. And I think sometimes we can easily forget that. We fall into these seasons where it's so challenging and we're so stressed and we can be discouraged and even depressed or lonely, and we feel like, does my life matter? Like, is there purpose in my life? And I wanted to remind you of that today, that your life does matter, that there is purpose in you. There is purpose in every interaction with a person that you have in your life. There is purpose in your studies right now. There is purpose in your workplace. There is purpose in everything that you do. We are seen and known and loved by God. And when we pour our hearts into the avenues that He has given us in our lives, whether that's, loving and reaching one person, or loving and reaching 10 people or 30 people or 500 people in our day-to-day life, that there is purpose and there is beauty in that. And I don't want you to forget that, and that you are called to be right where you are in this very moment, that God created you for a reason, that you are not an accident, that your life matters very deeply to God's plan for the world, God's plan for existence, God's plan for all things. You matter within that plan. God didn't just make you because He felt like it. She is exactly what the world needs right here, right now, this minute. And there you were, and here you are, and no one can take your place. It makes me very emotional because I want you to know that in your heart and soul, that no one can take your place, that you are unique and unrepeatable. And that becomes this kind of like trite, cheesy kind of thing, but it's not a trite, cheesy thing. It's the gritty, beautiful, deep reality of who you are. And I wanted you to hear that, because some of you don't hear that from anyone in your life, and I know that because you tell me. As long as your heart is beating, it's amazing if you just feel your heartbeat for a second. As long as your heart is beating, God's plan for you is in motion, and He is keeping the world in motion, all the galaxies, the earth spinning, and keeping your heartbeat all at the same time. Nobody can take your place. Never forget that. Keep your hearts up. I'll talk to you soon. Bye!
So I absolutely love her. She's absolutely amazing. So feel free to check out. Let me just get for a second. Emily Wilson. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Emily Wilson. Just wanted to make sure. She just has so much
said in previous videos.
encouragement. So I would absolutely encourage you to check her out. So yeah. But yeah, so I hope that you just take this message to heart today, because you are unique and unrepeatable. And it makes me choke up just like listening to it again. I remember like the first time I listened to that, I think I was sobbing, because I was like, that's exactly what I need to hear, because I don't think I'm unique. I don't think that I matter. I don't think there's purpose in my life. But just to hear the beautiful truth that like God thought of me and wanted to create me, that I'm unique and unrepeatable, is so beautiful. So I hope that you take that close to your heart today too. Christian perspective on identity. So sometimes we can wrestle with identity. We put our identity in being an athlete, or in maybe it's in our career. Maybe it is in other circumstances or things. But we are not defined by our external circumstances or our internal beliefs or desires, but by what God says. I love this analogy where you find this random creation on the ground. It's like it's like all built together, and you're like, I have no idea what to use this thing for. Um, and you're like wondering and you're guessing. You're making some like educated guesses about like, maybe this could be used for like something in the kitchen, or maybe this is supposed to be used as a part of the car. And you're trying to figure out what this thing was made for and what is all about it. But then you find the person who created it, and they can tell you exactly what that purpose is for that random creation that you found. Um, and it's the same with us, is that we don't decide our purpose. We don't decide our identity, but we look to the one who created us for our purpose and for identity. And for those that are in Christ, we are children of God, chosen, loved, wonderfully made, beloved, delighted in, free, whole, redeemed. God just speaks all of this beautiful truth over us. So we're not the ones who pick our identity or our purpose, but God is the one that just beautifully shows us in His Word our identity and just reveals to us throughout our life our purpose. And Christian perspective on purpose. So we don't know or decide our own purpose because we didn't create ourselves. As I just said before, you find this random invention. You can guess at what it could be, and maybe you can get it right, but you're still not 100% certain because you didn't create that thing. But if you turn to God and look in His Word, what He speaks over us, then we can determine our purpose because we don't decide. We didn't create ourselves. God did. Um, and just know this truth that before the foundations of this world, God created you. And as I said before, God didn't have to create you. He doesn't have to do anything. He's the supreme ruler, the one who sits enthroned in the heavens. But He wanted to create you because He wanted you to exist. He wanted to be able to spend time with you, and He has purpose for you in this world. He has plans and a purpose for your life. All believers have the purpose of loving God, loving His people, and making Him known. We all have that purpose. And then God gives specific purposes to each person. Um, and maybe you think like, what purpose do I have? And as Emily said, like there is beautiful purpose in each interaction. There's purpose in how you smile at someone on the street. There is purpose in how you serve others. There's purpose in you. Um, and I think so often we get caught up in figuring out like what is the specific purpose that God has created for me. But I believe that God gives us different purposes, different times in our life. Um, Maybe you're a high schooler and the purpose that God has for you is knowing Him and loving Him and building lasting friendships. Maybe you're in college and God's purpose for you is for volunteering and helping elderly people in a nursing home, and for loving your family and friends. Maybe you're out of college and God's purpose for you is to help connect people to Him or to serve others through your workplace. Maybe you're a mother and God's purpose for you is to take care of your children. So I absolutely believe that God's purpose for us changes throughout our life and our circumstances, and that we don't have just this one thing that we like need to figure out. But there can be purpose in each, there is purpose in each of our moments. There's purpose in you watching this video. There's purpose in what you're going to do later today. Um, there's purpose in everything, and it doesn't have to be this big thing that we need to solve. Like, my purpose is going to be my job. Well, maybe it's part of your purpose. But I would bet that like there are people in your life that you can touch with the love and light of the Lord, and that's a beautiful purpose. Like, how amazing is it to be able to shine God's love and light on the people around you, that you don't have to go across the world, you don't have to like leave the state. Um, so yeah, so just a reminder that like there's beautiful purpose in the now. And I love this quote. How cool is it that the same God who created mountains and oceans and galaxies looked at you and thought the world needed one of you too? Just like so, so beautiful. Christian perspective on belonging, communication, and connection. You've always belonged to God, and you belong in the body of Christ, and God never intended for us to do this life alone. Um, and it's just something beautiful to know that, like, I really struggled with belonging. I struggled with social anxiety, so I always felt like I really didn't belong. But to know that I've always belonged to God and that I belong in the body of Christ. Even if you've had negative experiences with church bodies or things like that, if you are in Christ, you belong in the body of Christ. And there's a beautiful function and purpose. And that God never intended us to do this life alone, that He built us for community and connection. I think this is supposed to actually be community here. Apologize for the typos. I just kind of do things quickly now. But next up, eating disorders as a way to escape, avoid. Indicators that you may struggle with escape and avoidance. Maybe you have a low distress tolerance. You have intense discomfort with negative emotions. I don't really like to label them negative because emotions are just kind of what we feel, and there doesn't have to be bad emotions. But maybe you have like some negative emotions that you think are negative, and you really experience intense discomfort with them. Maybe you fear that the emotions, feelings, thoughts that you have will harm you. Maybe you believe that you can't cope. Maybe you struggle with impulsivity, fear of being laughed at, strong fear of being rejected, or seeking a sense of safety. Signs the eating disorder is being used to distract from reality as a way to escape, avoid. So eating disorder behaviors, maybe it's a mental escape from trauma or a way to suppress intrusive thoughts. I know that was definitely for me too, because I'm like, it's much easier to think about calories and weight than these scary thoughts I have about death and dying or these OCD intrusive thoughts. And maybe it's to avoid numb emotions, which all are kind of leading to distracting from our current reality. Signs that eating disorder is being used to distract from reality, maybe binging and purging to numb or avoid emotions, over exercising to zone out, disconnect, restricting to dull emotions, higher levels of care to escape reality. Now, this is nothing against higher levels of care. I absolutely believe that they can be so beneficial and helpful. But I know sometimes, at least for myself, I would daydream about like getting back into IOP because I wanted to disconnect from the current reality and go into something that was familiar. Also, I felt belonging and connection there. So that's kind of like I wanted to be back in IOP in order to escape from the current difficulties, to have time away, and also to feel that connection. So that's not anything against higher level of care, but I think sometimes maybe we can use thinking about higher level of care as a way to escape from our present reality, which maybe we do need a break and escape because things are just so intense and we're struggling so deeply. But so please don't take this that I'm like, don't go to higher level of care because you're trying to distract from reality. No, I'm just saying for myself, at least, I would daydream about higher level of care because I'm like, I want to get away and I don't want things to be so hard, even though higher level of care is not easy. So other conditions you may have in terms of escaping, avoiding, PTSD, depression, a history of trauma. I'm not saying you have PTSD because you're trying to escape, avoid. I'm saying that you likely have some history of trauma, something that was really difficult. And so this is kind of maybe an indicator that you have a history of something really difficult and challenging. So I just want to make sure I'm treading very lightly with discussing trauma and PTSD. Potential core beliefs for escape and avoidance. I am hopeless. I am powerless. I can't cope. I deserve to suffer. I am bad. I am insignificant. Steps to take. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, improving distress tolerance. Now, I don't personally have a history of trauma, so my heart goes out to you if you're struggling. So maybe you have some other ideas on steps you can take here. But these are just a couple that I found that could potentially help you with escape avoidance tendencies. Final thoughts for today. is summary of the results. So over 80% indicated negative core beliefs of I am not enough and I am worthless. Over 80% indicated a core fear of losing control, not being in control. Over 90% indicated a function of the eating disorders to feel in control, and 85% indicated the eating disorder function to numb emotions. Overall, the core of many of the eating disorders, at least from what people indicated in the survey, was to feel in control to numb emotions. So if we can start to target that need to be in control, if we can dig deeper, why do I need to feel in control? Could that help us with the eating disorder so we're not turning to the eating disorder to feel in control? If we're using the eating disorder to numb emotions, can we work on improving our coping tools? Can we work on our distress tolerance so we're not using the eating disorder, we're not using binging, purging, restricting, over exercising to numb? Some ideas. Diving deeper, if you too feel that the eating disorder is to feel in control or numb, ask yourself why questions. I will do an example in the worksheet. Now this is very heavy, kind of deep work. So if you feel that this would be best to discuss with a therapist, absolutely do that. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And also just remember that sometimes it's really hard to find the root. Sometimes there's many roots, many different contributors. So I'd absolutely encourage you to work through this with a therapist. I remember when I was kind of diving into this, it's very emotionally, mentally draining to try to think through these like deeper, like, why am I feeling the way that I do? So homework, if you'd like a little follow-up, I love homework, so I love learning. Challenge your need for control slash to be in control. As we saw, that was a common theme. And work on distress tolerance skills. Core fears and beliefs worksheet. So let me see if I have anything else here really quick. We'll do the core belief stuff first. Okay, worksheets for presentation. Oh, I started. And additional worksheets. Which one? Let's start with this one. Okay, so I'm going to link these in, I know I'm sending this out in an email, but also on our YouTube page. So I will link these, but these are some of the modifiable causes and contributors that are true for me. So I'll put a blank one as well. So these are some examples, but you can go ahead and write in some of these that are true for you, and how to overcome them slash lessen that contributor. And then it has some recommended books, reading materials to kind of help with that. So you've got perfectionism, anxiety, low energy availability, internalization of the thin ideal, low self-worth, low social support, emotional dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation. And then these are functions of the eating disorder that are true for me, some ways to overcome them. So you can check out the PowerPoint, do some research on your own, talk with a therapist, and then some resources. This first link is really cool on kind of breaking free from core beliefs. So I'm not gonna like fully dive into this now because I covered a lot of this in the presentation, but feel free to check this out, print it out if you want. Again, I'll also include a blank one so that you can write down, maybe brainstorm some of those modifiable causes, some of those things from the beginning that maybe they're true for you. And if we can work through some of those, then would that help to lessen the eating disorder too? And some of those functions of the eating disorder too. These are kind of the 4 main categories that I have. I'm sure there's more. I'm sure I did not catch all of them. So if you're like, none of these seem true for me, and that now you're feeling like, I'm hopeless, there's no hope for me. Absolutely a lie. I'm sure there is hope. I believe in you. So just know that if you didn't really resonate with things from the presentation today, that does not mean you're wrong or you're bad or that you're never going to get better, okay? Because I believe in you. So I've got this, and then I really love this one. So, not that I didn't love the other one. Core fears worksheet. So, kind of, I feel like maybe let's talk about this one first. So this is the asking why from kind of that last slide. I just want to make sure I don't run out of battery on you guys. Perfect. So orthorexia. So I struggle with orthorexia. I used to. So I have to eat healthy would have been one of the first thoughts. Why do I have to eat healthy? Or why can't I eat that thing? Because there's this specific ingredient in there. So why? Why does that matter? Because that ingredient is there. Why does that matter? Because I'll get sick with cancer. Well, why is that bad? Because I could die, and I will die because I was convinced if I got cancer, I would die. And why is that bad? Because I'm worried I'll just cease to exist. That was definitely one of my core fears, that when I die, it will just be blackness and nothingness. And that terrified me to cease to exist. So if we kind of see, and now maybe people would disagree too, but this surface level of me needing to eat healthy and avoid certain ingredients was really this deeper core fear of I'm worried I'll cease to exist. Anorexia compulsive exercise. I have to work out a certain amount per week. Why? Well, because if I don't, I'll be unhealthy. Well, why is that bad? I could get heart disease. Well, why is that bad? I'll die. Why is that bad? I'm worried I'll cease to exist. So, do I have any of those? Okay. So that kind of gets to this one. So this is personally for me, my fear of death and dying, ceasing to exist was very much underlying my mental illnesses, which I will kind of show. So as I talked about, orthorexia, I had an obsession with healthy eating, trying to stave off death, dying, sickness, cancer. So kind of then leading to fear of getting cancer. Health anxiety, OCD. I was fearful of hospitals. I was fearful to touch surfaces. I was fearful of getting skin cancer, being out in the sun, of ingredients, chemicals that could cause cancer. Kind of the common thing there is fear of getting cancer. Why was I afraid of getting cancer? Because I was afraid of dying. More specifically, afraid of ceasing to exist. Anorexia, changing my appearance to look more beautiful, attractive, so guys would like me because I felt like I was not beautiful or attractive. I had this fear of dying alone, dying and never being loved, and then ceasing to exist. Overall fear of death and dying. OCD scrupulosity, I had intense fears and distress related to my faith, obsession and compulsions with my faith, because I was really worried about dying, going to hell, or ceasing to exist, or being completely wrong about everything. And what does that mean about death and dying? Does that mean that I cease to exist? So this is an example for myself of kind of how things were for me. And once I started to really tackle, I mean, there's a lot of factors. I went through a lot of therapy, a lot of support groups, dietitian appointments. So I'm not saying that just tackling this direct core fear, death and dying, cured everything, because I didn't attack this for like many years into recovery. But once I did, then it lessened my need to avoid certain ingredients. It lessened my need to feel like I needed to exercise compulsively. It lessened my the strength of the fear of getting sick, because once I started to tolerate some of the uncertainty with death and dying, once I started to dive into my faith and really think like, what do I actually believe? What is true? Then those other things lessened, because now like they lost their power a bit because that core is gone. A core belief, I am unlovable as I am. So kind of similar with the anorexia, maybe changing appearance to look more beautiful, attractive. Feeling like I must change because I'm ugly as I am, because the core belief I have was that I'm unlovable as I am. Depression, intense sadness and sorrow stemming from feeling unlovable. OCD scrupulosity, intense fear and distress with my faith, because I felt the need that I had to work to earn God's love and acceptance, with that core belief of I am unlovable as I am. So if I can tackle that core fear of feeling unlovable, do I need the eating disorder as strongly then? Potentially not. So kind of just going into this, like, thinking like I must lose weight and stay thin. Why? So I become more beautiful. Why? So guys like me. Well, why would I need to lose weight for that? Why do I need this? Well, because I'm unlovable and ugly as I am. So I'm not saying it's easy, because this took me a lot of time in recovery to kind of look through. So similar, I am worthless, distressing emotions. This one was kind of related to running for me. So I must run. Why? I need to. Well, why do I need to? I feel lost without it. Well, why do I feel lost without it? Because I believe there's nothing good about me outside of running. But why do I think that? Well, because inherently I'm worthless. So, ceasing to exist again. Here's a little tree example. If you want to think of kind of the leaves as eating disorder behaviors, the branches are more surface level fear. So maybe it's of becoming unhealthy, gaining weight, maybe fear of getting cancer for myself. Trunk is more core beliefs, general. So I needed to do these things because I was afraid of becoming unhealthy, because I was afraid of getting cancer, afraid of death and dying, and kind of more of the core is fear of ceasing to exist. And then here's one example on kind of hyper focus on weight, rigidity with exercise, more surface level fears or core beliefs, desire to be perfect, can't make mistakes. The trunk function, intense discomfort with making mistakes, so trying to control these things so I don't experience that discomfort. With the root being like, I'm not enough, so that's why I can't make these mistakes. I must be perfect because I don't feel enough, and maybe I will feel enough if I'm not making mistakes. Or if I carefully control everything, maybe then I'll feel like I'm good enough. So a blank one, just an example. So yeah, just an idea for you to check out if you'd like. And I will close with this quote and I will pray over you guys. Um, you matter. Don't give up. This world needs what you have to offer. I love, love, love this quote. But I absolutely believe each of you listening to this was created on purpose for a purpose. That you matter so deeply to God, to this world, to people around you, that God created you specifically and intentionally, that you have gifts and talents and abilities to offer this world that only you have to offer. And the world needs that. The world needs you. So please don't give up. This world needs you. You have so many beautiful gifts and talents. You have a light inside of you that this world needs. So if you ever feel like you don't matter or your life is purposeless or that you should give up and um, just know that you are so needed in this world. So I just want to thank you all. Here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me. Um, Yes, I would love input too if you were like, "Oh, this part, like, felt really, like, triggering," or, "This part was, like, really, like, not okay," or, like, "I really liked this part." Please feel free to let me know. I'm not gonna be offended if you tell me, like, something was, like, not helpful in here, because I wanna make sure, like, my goal with the Recovered is for it to be as trigger-free as possible. That's always been my goal. So if there's something that you were like really uncomfortable with, please let me know because I'll be happy to re-record this or kind of take that clip out, um, just to make sure that I'm protecting people's recoveries. So I started the reference page. As you noticed there may have been a lot of typos. Apologize, but embracing imperfection. So I am going to pray. So if you feel comfortable, please feel free to continue listening. Otherwise, I won't know if you kind of tune out now. So, Lord God, I just thank you for this beautiful opportunity to just present on root causes, core fears, core functions of the eating disorder. I pray over each individual listening to this, Lord, that you would just illuminate the purposes that the eating disorder is serving for them or their loved one, that you would illuminate your truth and goodness to them. You would fill their heart and soul and mind with your truth, Lord, that you would help them to dive deeper into your truth and your love and your goodness, Lord. May each of these wonderful people listening know that you created them on purpose for a purpose, that they matter, that they're irreplaceable, Lord, and that you are walking through this battle with them. I just thank you for this wonderful opportunity today. And I thank you for just these amazing people that are listening. In your name we pray. Amen. Awesome. So thank you for tuning in. Please feel free again to reach out if you have questions, comments, concerns. I would be more than happy to kind of answer anything that you would have. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And yeah, I'll see you next time because I'm sure I will be posting some more videos. Awesome. Bye.